In China, the Nian is a fierce and deadly type of creature. Some live under the seas and some live high on mountains. It has the body of a dragon, the feet of a lion covered in long fur, and its face resembles the lion's, only it has flatter features and long fur. Every spring, the Nian comes to populated places to feed on humans. It will take animals, but it prefers men, and so it can be found where men are gathered outside. It hates loud noises, fire, and the color red. Hence, the Chinese New Year festival happens every spring, in which drums are banged loudly, firecrackers are lit, and the color red are prominent. This is intended to scare away the Nian. Earlier this spring, though, a Nian came from his home under the sea and entered a dockyard full of men and shipping containers. The yard was noisy, and the creature quickly became disoriented among the labyrinth of containers. As workers attached chains to a nearby container, the beast scuttled into an open one, trying to escape the loud rattling and clanking. He moved swiftly toward the back of the container and realized he was trapped. Then the same sound surrounded him as the men threw chains and dragged them all over his metal hiding place. Hunger and fear made him frantic, and he darted toward the open end where two men yelled directions at the others. Just as he cleared the last crate, aiming for the plumper man on the right, the door swung shut, and Nian was in total darkness surrounded by horrible loud noises. He cowered to the back corner as this container was lifted into the air, and then set down again. He paced and growled as the noises kept going. He clawed at the side of the container, but it was solid against his attacks. After a while, the noises stopped, and he was aware of a gentle rocking motion that seemed to go on forever. He knew the sensation. It was the same feeling he had when he was in his home under the sea. A soothing feeling. Except now, he couldn't feel the water around him, hugging his body. He huddled near the back of the container, growing hungrier by the minute. Now, I'll just say my name is Adam for the benefit of this story. I'm not going to give you my real name, it's not safe. I was a dock worker for a few years in California, that is, until earlier this spring. I worked with a guy named Tony, and I pieced this story together from what I had heard, what I saw, and what Tony wrote down in his notebook, and the police and medical examiner reports as well. Shipping containers arrived from China. They were unloaded from the ship and put in their semi-neat rows. Nothing out of the ordinary. Days after the shipment, Tony came to me and asked if I cared to stay over for a couple hours and help him out. The new guys had screwed up the paperwork again, and it was up to him to straighten it out before the next day. All I knew at the time was that Tony went down one path and I went down another, checking for unpacked containers. After a while, he came back to me and seemed panicky. Said that there was some trouble in one of the containers, and he sent me home, stating that he had to call the police and to report the trouble. I was confused, but he was my boss, so in the end, well, I clocked out and I went home. This is what I found later written in Tony's notebook. I found an unpacked shipping container from China. It was unlocked and the door was standing open. I went inside. About halfway in, there was a large metal crate that had been completely ripped open and shredded. There was Chinese writing and some strange markings on the sides. I took pictures of it with my phone. Just a bit farther back, I found blood and clumps of hair smeared on the floor, the wall, and the other crates. My stomach churned and I gagged. The smell was horrific in the stale hot air of the container. My first thought that it was from Michael. He was the other supervisor, the one that had supposed to be making sure that the new guys didn't screw up on the paperwork again. I thought he was on one of his cocaine and whiskey binges in the next county. It wouldn't have been the first time he disappeared for a day or two like that. But when I saw all that blood and gore, well, I had to wonder if it was actually him. Of course, I immediately phoned the police to report what I had found, giving them as many details as possible. And I flipped through the pictures on my phone, wondering what could have shredded that metal crate. I waited nearly 30 minutes for the police, but instead of the police, a group of 10 Asian businessmen showed up. They all wore bright red suit jackets, which made them more like workers from a fancy hotel than businessmen. One walked toward me, flashing some kind of metal-looking badge, and the others skirted around me, heading for the rows of containers. The man in front of me only said that they were there for the reported container. Confused, I shook my head. I yelled at them to stop and ran to block their path. "Can't go down there. There's a problem. I have to call the police. They have to investigate it." They barely spared me a glance as they pushed past me. There was nothing left to do except follow them, so I could report whatever they did to the police, if the police ever showed up. Now, I don't know how they knew where to go, but they walked straight to the container and pushed the doors wide. One of the men placed his briefcase on top of the crate near the entrance and opened it. Bright light bathed the inside of the container from the portable LED system he had in that case. At this time, their chatter was indecipherable to me, and I have no idea what they talked about, but their conversation seemed to be centered around the destroyed metal crate. A couple of them pointed to the blood and hair, but they weren't very interested in it, or so it seemed to me. I thought maybe they were the owners of whatever had been in that destroyed crate. I wondered if it had been some kind of animal, illegally transported, that had torn free of its container and then killed one of the dock workers. The guy that flashed the badge at me walked back to where I stood. I was worried and more than a little scared at that point. He asked me what I had seen, what made me call the cops. And I told him, but he didn't seem satisfied by my answer. The light was shut off and the others gathered in front of the open container, just glaring at me menacingly. "Tell me everything you saw. Leave out no details. It is for your own safety." He stepped closer to me. I thought about showing him the pictures from my phone, but something in his threatening tone stopped me. I told him again what I had seen, and he translated this information to his colleagues, and, after several minutes of deliberation, they nodded at him. "The police will not come to investigate this matter. It was our business, and now it is done. The container will be sealed, and no one is to go in or out of it until we say differently. Understand?" His face was unreadable, but his tone said enough. Nodding, I backed up a few steps. The other men had fashioned a giant X across the container doors with wide red tape. They did the same on the other 3 sides of the container while the men asked me to repeat my story one final time. When I finished, he stared unblinking at me and shook his head. It was a tiny movement. He still didn't believe me. He took my name, which I gave reluctantly, and then motioned for me to walk back toward the office with him, leaving the other men alone out there amongst the containers. "Tony, it is time for you to go home and put this out of your mind. It is done. We thank you for your cooperation." He bowed and then left abruptly. I considered calling the cops again, but hell, the Asian men had shown up the first time I called the cops. All the way home, I kept looking in my rear view to make sure that they weren't following me. At home, I rushed inside and locked the doors. Grabbing my laptop, I headed to the bedroom using the pictures from my phone. I started researching the markings on the crate. As the search results page popped up, I saw a picture of the beast with the word Nyan printed under it, and then my computer shut down. No matter what I tried, the laptop wouldn't come back on at all. I tried to look it up on my phone, but it wouldn't connect to the internet. There must have been something wrong on the other side of the cable service. and I gave up. Sometime after midnight, I decided the Asian businessman hadn't followed me, and I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning before sunrise, I headed for the kitchen to make coffee. Stretching as I passed the living room, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and turned back, peering around the doorway. In the middle of my living room sat a huge metal crate with that same Chinese writing on it. It was too big to fit through any of my doors, and I didn't understand how it could have gotten there. My doors were still locked from the inside, even the chain locks. The crate had a simple lock holding the door closed. I could have picked it, but I wasn't sure I really wanted to see what was inside. I mean, the thing had appeared in my living room without explanation, although with the Chinese writing on it, I was sure those Asian businessmen from the dock had something to do with it. That didn't ease my mind, and, well, it didn't stop my curiosity from building, though. And so I sat in my recliner and started writing down everything about the container, including what I had found at the dock. With my laptop not working and my phone on the fritz, I felt I needed to write it down so that there was a record of it somewhere. I tried to leave the living room and get ready for work, but I didn't want to leave the crate. It's dark outside now, and the crate has begun emitting a low humming sound. I think there are words in that hum. I sat on the floor with my ears pressed against the side of the crate. There are definitely words inside that humming sound. It gets louder sometimes, and when it does, the sound turns into a vibration that runs through my whole body. At first, it was a little painful, but now, I find it rather relaxing. Last night, I fell asleep with my head against the crate. I had a terrible dream. I traced the words "Yan" on the crate with my finger, and as I did, that humming sound grew louder and louder until the vibrations turned my vision to waves like the ripples in a lake after you throw in a rock. Then I was no longer in my living room, but in deep, dark water. The pressure of the water hugged my body, and the rocking motion of the waves soothed me as they carried me toward the light. I stepped onto land, feeling heavy and weak. I was so hungry, as if I hadn't eaten in weeks. Looking down, I saw that I had the legs of a lion, and my body looked that of a dragon covered in thick green scales. Confused, I headed toward the yard where the shipping containers are set and got lost in the maze. There were loud noises, and I hid in a container where I was trapped, longing for home, needing food, afraid, and alone. When the container was opened again, I saw Michael, but he looked like food. My hunger took over and I devoured him. The feel of my teeth ripping into his flesh and the copper taste of his blood filled me with satisfaction. I crunched his bones, savoring the marrow inside. I'd been nearly starved, but now my hunger was satiated. I woke up from the nightmare gagging as I shoved away from the crate. Now I'm sitting in my recliner, listening to the words and the hum. And I don't know how long I've been sitting here, but I can't leave the room at all anymore. The barely lucid moments I have, I write down more of my experience. Then the hum starts up again, and I'm lulled into oblivion where I see visions of the hideous creature. I'm no longer the creature in the visions and dreams. The thing is coming for me. It's hunting me down and I'm running out of places to hide. I heard the words last night, or maybe today. I can't keep days and nights separate in my mind anymore. It's all that undulating darkness, rocking me and hugging me, carrying me back into black watery depths as I close my eyes. The thing in the crate wants out. It whispers to me like a lover, but tells me such terrible things. Beautiful, terrible things that turn into bloody images in my mind. I can't remember the words, only the images they paint. There's a screwdriver by the crate, and my fingers are bloody. I think I tried to let the thing out of its crate in my sleep. I'm weak and don't have the strength left to get out of my seat. I'm so weak. I can hear it whispering to me. Let me out. Let me out. I'm so hungry. And I can almost see through the walls of the crate sometimes. I see the creature in there with no room to pace but wanting to. His scales glisten in the darkness, shimmering and dark like the waters of his home. The long fur around his face and feet floating as if he were in water. His eyes, burning gold, pierce through the dark, mesmerizing me. If I stare hard enough, I can make the walls of that crate completely disappear. I feel pity for the thing trapped in there, but I don't have the strength to free him now. I'm not afraid anymore. I belong to him. He has chosen me. He chose me to bear witness to his existence, to his magnificent power and beauty. I'm his. I called the police to do a welfare check on Tony when he didn't show up for work all week. He didn't answer my texts or my calls, and when I went to his place, the doors were locked and the curtains were drawn tight all over the windows. I guess, looking back, I should have called the cops sooner, but, I don't know. You see, in my line of work, it's not unusual for men to lay out of work for days at a time. It was out of character for Tony, though. I just wish I had been concerned sooner. The police officer's report simply stated that he entered Tony's house at 12:46 p.m. on a welfare check, initiated by a concerned friend, obviously me, to find the man deceased in his recliner, staring at a spot on the floor where there were indentations in the rug as if something very large and very heavy had sat there for a length of time. The medical examiner noted that Tony's face was contorted in an expression of horror and pain, and after a thorough examination, listed his death as a heart attack.